Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome, everyone, ladies, gentlemen, guys, gals, and non binary pals. I'm Monique Springer, Project Officer with UWIHARP, and I'm joined today with Keelia Anderson, our Project Assistant. A very special welcome to our students, staff members, colleagues with the National HIV/AIDS Commission, off campus partners, repeat visitors, and to our new guests. UWIHARP is the HIV Sexual Health Unit at UWI, and we seek to positively influence sexual and reproductive health and wellness of the university population and the wider Caribbean society. Our primary focus is the development of sexual health literacy among the community through programs such as our digital dialogues. These are sexual health conversations, and they will be held during the semester. These include the S-Files discussion series on a wide range of topics and the Shock series, which will focus on sexual health issues among our vulnerable Caribbean populations during COVID-19. And you can look out for our flyers on our social media platforms, which include Facebook, Instagram, the UWI app, and through UWI student emails. There are some participating notices. All mics are muted and videos are turned off. Q&A will take place after the presentation and mics will be unmuted. We ask you to post your questions or comments during the presentation in the chat pod located at the bottom of the screen. We aim to address as many as possible. Alternatively, you can message either me or Keelia directly if you prefer. For those questions we couldn't get to, please email them to uwiharp@cavehill.uwi.edu before the end of the day, and we will address them shortly afterwards. The sessions will be recorded, and the recordings will be posted afterwards on our social media platforms, including our YouTube channel, UWIHARP Cave Hill. These will be done without sensitive personal discussions to protect participants' confidentiality. Please note that we cannot guarantee confidentiality in this public forum among participants, so be cautious about what personal information you disclose about yourself and others. It's safer to talk in general terms. Please complete also the evaluation form that will be sent to you after the session. You can suggest topics that you're interested in for us to facilitate. There are a few rules for participation, and some of them have been adapted from the HIV 2020 online. UWIHARP's digital dialogues provide a safe space to address a range of sexual health topics using a sex-positive approach. We encourage participants to share their knowledge, experiences, and opinions in a respectful manner. You may disagree with views highlighted today. However, please be respectful of other outlooks, regardless of your religious or moral beliefs. Let us be mindful in the way we discuss sensitive topics. UWIHARP operates on a zero tolerance policy for any kind of abusive, discriminatory, belligerent, or disparaging comments or actions that may cause distress to presenters and/or participants. Persons who engage in any undesirable behaviors will be immediately removed from the webinar unannounced. UWIHARP's guiding principle is to first do no harm. On today's topic, we will be looking at sexual pleasure and intimacy. Let's rap about it. And today is going to be our last S-Files discussion. We will be having more discussions with the Shock webinar series. And I thought it best to, and I told LaToya this, to leave the spiciest topic to last. And UWIHARP's approach towards comprehensive sexuality education, as many of you may have noticed, we have a wide range, as I mentioned in the intro, of sexual health topics. And we found that it's important to include sexual pleasure as well as part of our comprehensive sexuality education. And just being located within the HIV programming, you know, in the very beginning, the language coming out of the HIV discourse and around, especially in academia, portrayed sex and sexuality within a framework of risk and danger, rather than as an intimate connection between people and conversations around love, desire, and pleasure were not part of this development lexicon. And this is taken from Cornwall and Jolly 2006. So I think it's very timely. There has been a lot of work being done in this field, and today we have in this field on sexual pleasure, sexual and reproductive health educator, sexologist, and sex coach with more than 10 years of experience in the area of sexual and reproductive health and rights with the Barbados Family Planning Association and the International Planned Parenthood Federation, IPPF. LaToya brings a wealth of knowledge and information from a sex-positive perspective on female sexual pleasure and sexual health. Her business, Pillow Talk Caribbean, is a sexual health coaching clinic and research center where she assists Barbadians and, by extension, Caribbean women understand and grow their sexual selves. I now invite LaToya to share her presentation and to have a conversation with us, and then we can have a chat afterwards. LaToya, I am turning over to you.
Right. So as Molly has given me a gracious introduction already, I don't need to go into this anymore, but this is just to say hello, how are you? It's moi, and let's start. So I love this area because I like to talk about sexual pleasure. When I started in the area of sexual reproductive health and rights, often we did not talk about sexual pleasure. We often spoke about issues such as contracting STIs, avoiding pregnancy too early, teenage pregnancy. We talked about all the problems, but very little did we talk about the pleasure and the reason why people interacted or had sex in the first place. Of course, there was, it can feel good, and then that would be a brush over aspect of it. But what I really want to talk to you today about is understanding sexual pleasure, understanding how you have understood sexual pleasure and how that has been built up, and what crafting sexual pleasure for yourself looks like now. So that's where the intimacy aspect comes in, especially. So let's get hot together, okay? So I have a big definition because big definitions are great, right? And we can always break them all the way down. So sexual pleasure is the physical and or psychological satisfaction and enjoyment derived from solitary or shared erotic experiences, including thoughts, dreams, and autoerotism. Wow, sounds like a lot, but let's break this all the way down. So it is the physical or psychological satisfaction. Now, if you identify as female, many of us identify as being sexual first in the mind. So when we identify our partners, we say, yes, I like this person and I think I would have sex with them. They first have lit our brain up. That's how we first, most of us, we get aroused with our brains. We say, okay, I like this person, physical attributes aside, because sometimes people can be very sexy in the physical form, and then they open their mouth and it all falls flat for you. Good. So sexual pleasure is how you manifest that enjoyment. Physically, what do you like? Touching, feeling, along with the physical, psychological attributes to that. How are you feeling? How are you seeing your eroticism play out? And it's derived from solitary or shared erotic experiences. So what does that mean? How are you sharing that sexual experience with another person? How are you sharing your body with another person? Or how are you not sharing your body with another person? And it includes the thoughts, dreams, and I like how they say masturbation because it's basically autoeroticism, which just means playing with yourself. But I like how fancy they went with that one. And that's from the Global Advisory for Sexual Health and Wellbeing. And the reason why I like this definition in particular is because it seems to me to encompass just about all the small little aspects that come together with encapsulating sexual pleasure. I like the physical, I like the psychological satisfaction, and I like that they include the word satisfaction because it's not about orgasm achievement, but it's about mutual and solo satisfaction of your own erotic prowess. So we're going to definitely go through that and talk a little bit more. Right. So I wanted to set us up for the path that we're taking to understanding sexual pleasure and how we would have built up to being able to even launch off. As individuals, we have gotten a lot of messaging from very young about what sexual pleasure will and will not look like. So, for example, I started with the first block of family, and it doesn't matter how your family is made up, your first sexual pleasure derivatives and how it's all encapsulated comes from family. Because when you're young, you might find that you might recognize, depending on how your genitalia is set up, that when you rub or you touch yourself in particular ways, it feels very good. And it's not a sexual satisfaction, it is a purely pleasure based satisfaction. So, this is where people often get out of touch and say stuff like, oh, I don't let my child touch himself because I don't want him doing things like that. When the satisfaction that they are achieving is not of a sexual nature, it's purely on a pleasure based, it just feel good nature. And how people respond to how you touch yourself as a child often leads into how you feel about yourself going forward. And that's a pleasure. That's a one block built. It's also about how you view your body, how you touch your body, and how you are told how people are to interact with you as a person. So if you're not given a lot of bodily autonomy, for example, you're not allowed to refuse hugs and kisses, then you find that when you go forward as an adult, you may or may not be somebody who's easily triggered by certain reactions. Somebody comes forward too quickly for a hug, and you were always a child who really hated that. You find yourself you clench up very quickly, and that leads itself into your sex life for sure. So family is a big derivative of how you build your sexual pleasure because it gives you foundation works on how you as an individual are able to communicate and express yourself as a person, and how people view body and body anatomy, how they put shame on certain body parts. You might recognize whether or not they call body parts by the correct words, um, what they say about them, how they interact with them, even something as simple as washing undergarments. Where do the female undergarments go versus the male undergarments? And it also tells you a lot about gender roles and how you as woman or you as man are supposed to interact with the opposite sex. And they might also determine whether or not their views on certain types of sexuality and sexual practices. So family is a big launching pad. I have to put it there because it is very important, irrespective of how your family system is set up. It is one of the biggest blocks, and it's nothing to be, shared around. The second, I have friends. Now I put friends because your social life from school onwards is a big learning experience for persons. So your friends will influence, and I'm pretty sure you guys are aware of this, on how you take the information you're getting from the outside world and apply it to your life. So if you recognize your friends are those that tend to have a certain viewpoint, you will be more or less influenced into that viewpoint as well. So if, for example, you are someone who hangs out with people who are very, very Christian and have a very shame-based and purity mindset, then you find that you too, whether or not you recognize it, often follow the same trajectory and pattern. And they will shame you into certain practices, and they will shame you into certain behaviors, or you might not even recognize it as shame. You just recognize it as they're guiding you to a better path. We can get down to whether or not it's a better path, right? Good. So your friends are a big derivative. So if your friends are also someone who is more into gang culture or dub, depending on music styles that they're interested into, that kind of thing will also influence you because it also do, as you can see, one of the other 7 blocks is popular media. And your friends, their taste in what they like and what you like, because of course you're friends, they will go together, and the kind of media that you're interacting with supports that kind of influence. The third block that I have here is religion. And whether or not you see yourself as a religious person, it is a significant block and building block in how you have built up your sexual pleasure. And this is incredibly critical because many people don't see religion in their lives as having a significant influence, especially if they say, oh, I didn't go to church very often, or, you know, I don't have that kind of role for religion in my life. It still plays a significant aspect into how you interact with your body, how you view sex on the whole, and it can have significant lasting effects on how your sexual expression comes about. So, and it permeates through the all of the other blocks, because your religion influences your friends and influences your family, and therefore influences you. Now, popular media and society on the whole. I was doing more and more research into this rabbit hole, because when you talk about purity culture and you talk about friends and family influence, you also have to recognize that popular media plays a significant influence into each of these things. Now, religion is a very good vehicle for, and they've done a very good job, especially some sectors, of media and marketing, and how in which they've been able to pitch themselves to people, because you really have to pitch no matter how you come across. Religion is a good pitching, because it tells you, okay, this is the way to live your life, but you have to have the good marketing behind it. So you have to have a good charismatic pastor, and, you know, good media and the first lady and that kind of thing. And there's also the other aspect of it, where there may be, and you know, you might be into dark rock or what's not, and that still has a good marketing to it. You like the lifestyle, you like how it looks, and all that is packaged in marketing. It comes through popular media, it comes through the things you're watching, the things that you see in advertisements and what's not. And increasingly, especially with the internet, we are getting more and more deconstructed into seeing sexual things next to random things like milk, and hearing advertisements that are being used, like sexual undertones are being used to sell things that are, to me, very regular, and it could have been a different way in which they pitch the product. But sex, as they say, sells, and therefore they sell everything, and that in all influences your entire sexual pleasure cycle. Like you're saying, LaToya, you're going a little bit on a reaching branch here, but stay with me, because if you really look at the things that you are taking in, it sincerely influences the way you see things and the way in which you interact with aspects. Like, for example, if you get repeated advertisements and targeted ads. Now everybody has a smartphone. If you say something to a friend about seeing a particular toy or wanting lingerie, then all of a sudden you would recognize that your phone and your search engine start to target you with lingerie ads. Simple. Media is a lot more smarter. But before, it was, you just had radio and you had, but now with the internet, you're constantly followed by that media, and therefore their influence is more significant. That's why when you have people, marketing persons using things like micro and macro influencers and lifestyle influencers categories, things like Instagram and Facebook, it is of significant interest to you, because it's interesting how they recognize that your regular consumption of just ordinary things influences your everyday purchases and your everyday decisions. And yes, it influences your sex life. Right. So I put this because we often ask ourselves, but how did beep I get here? Like, how we get off course? I thought it was good. Like, I have sexual pleasure down pat. Like, I know exactly what I want. I know how I want to achieve it. But at the same time, I have these niggling second thoughts, or I have these conversations in my brain that won't shut up, that won't let me enjoy sex. And this is where it starts. You have as we were talking just now about the Love Sweat, the Eric Joe and Dickie, you have the Cinderella. It really, really does influence how you see and view sexual pleasure. Because I remember I put Eric Joe and Dickie here because I remember when I was growing up as a teenager, his books were of particular interest to just about every Black child, Black teenage girl in Barbados. I don't know if anybody else had this experience, but it was mine, and therefore I use my I statements here. The conversations and some of the rhetoric that was in here was actually very purity pop culture based, in terms of you didn't want to be. I think one of the lines in his book that someone repeated to me that made me blink a lot and think very random things was that you don't want your, it was on body count, in terms of how many sexual partners you have. You don't want your window pane to be stained up with different people's fingerprints. And it was like, but I'm not a window, and there's Windex when the windows get smudged. But this was touted as, you want to make sure you stay clean. And so if you had many different sexual partners, it means that I was dirty. How do I negate this life then? Am I supposed to only stay with one partner? Supposed to be this partner's not any good? Do I stay just so that I won't let anybody put fingers on my window pane? And this is the kind of thing that stops you from achieving great sexual pleasure, because you've had these influences from different media outlets, from friends, from family, who reinforce things that they too have seen and heard in different spaces. And all of a sudden it sits with you like a big black cloud on the bed when you're trying to make love or just have sex. Right? So I put Love Sweat because, shoot, who hasn't read a Love Sweat book and haven't had the experience of reading the very, I would say trite, but that's not accurate, because it's actually, some of it is really good writing. He plunged his steel into her soft, velvety caresses and whatever they were saying. And then when you get to actual real sex being played out, it's not like that. So it creates unhealthy and unrealistic expectations in terms of sex, in terms of aspects of virginity, reinforcing virginity culture, where they're asking you to save this to this one great man and then you will bleed. And then when you actually get into actual sexual intercourse, you understand the anatomy of the female. If she's really relaxed for her first time, she's not going to bleed. So why does all this blood every time somebody loses their virginity? So again, the false concepts comes here. Cinderella, I always like to reference, because there is the note of the prince comes and then you come. Essentially in sex, like, he comes first, then you come. And that's how people have viewed sex for a very long time. Very misogynistic in that way, in terms of how we put pleasure of the male in front of the female consistently. Right. So I wanted to bring it home all the way into media that we all recognize and we all see. And these three images for me are very important, because I remember Banks Calendar Girl was a big thing. And I almost realized when it disappeared, but I remember there was a big scandal or something, and then it kind of dismissed. But I put these two particular images because I remember reading an article about one particular Banks girl who was disqualified for being in a chocolate bath. And it said that the Banks Calendar Girl was supposed to be wholesome. And I was like, but how? It's not to say that she couldn't have been wholesome and what's not, but just because I myself said, but how? And I had to ask myself, but LaToya, what makes you think that somebody scantily clad cannot be wholesome? And I say scantily clad because you could slightly see the first one in 2000. It wasn't too, I actually thought it was a really good picture. And then by 2015, it's a lot less clothes, which isn't bad because that's a really nice bathing suit, right? But these are the images that we get constantly as, regular, nothing out of the ordinary sexual pleasure. So what if you don't identify, you don't look like this as female? Am I female? Am I female enough? Am I female enough to be experiencing sexual pleasure? Will somebody find me desirable? Am I desirable? I don't look like this. My curves I don't have enough curves, especially for someone who's as small as me. I remember thinking, well, I don't have big breasts and a big butt, see, so nobody's going to be interested in me. And your self-esteem takes a tank, and it impacts your sexual pleasure because your body image comes from media, and it comes from friends, and it comes from family who are also saying these things and reinforcing these things. And especially in Barbadian context and Barbadian society, when you consider the fact that people will often comment on your weight and the way in which you look. If you're smaller, or you need to eat. If you're bigger, you can really put down the salt bread. These kind of things that people really just need to learn to shut up about. really impact how you and your sexual pleasure comes about. So these images bring together not only the fact of how people see female sexuality, I'm talking about the Banks ones, and see, how femaleness is supposed to be expressed, but it also tells you about size and body image and how we, especially in Barbados, would have seen sexy and what is regarded as extremely sexy. Just, I'm muting myself for 1 second. Hear a woman talk about sexual pleasure in a way that was, to me, it was honest. It was taking the male stereotype of getting on top and taking charge of your sexuality in a very positive way. Of course, years later, Lady Star has changed my slide. And now she's a gospel artist, and she's saying, she really didn't like it. She, her heart was never really in it, and that kind of thing. And I pointed this one out because people will often point to say, oh, but Lady Star didn't really mean that. She said that she had these things that she did, but that was not God. It was not a word and stuff. And it gives people thought about whether or not the songs that she did well in her years of being a mega dancehall artist, were they really uplifting, or was she just going through a phase? And for me, I take it where it was. The songs, to me, the songs were uplifting. I mean, you don't really get women saying the things that Lady Star say till now you have WAP. And Lady Star was the first WAPist. She's the first lady to come and say, get on top and do all the things. So I appreciated that. Now, I also included this poster that I saw on how a Christian woman is to adorn herself, because it really does tell you, and it gives you the flip coin of, here we have how you're seeing female sexuality displayed as, you could be wholesome and nice and sweet, just a little revealing, but not too revealing. You just want to be just on the precipice. And we often hear as women, I'm going to speak to more of the female gender, the discussion about, being sexy, but not too sexy. And then is a flip side of being modest, and how the way in which you are displaying yourself in your body, how that impacts your sexuality and how people see you sexually, and how that makes your value as a sexual being either increase or decline. So if you decide to be naked, your value as a person goes down, your sexual value goes down, and therefore you have no self-worth. So these things and how people talk about them and these different points all come together in how you express yourself sexually and how you are able to feel and enjoy and experience sexual pleasure. Okay. Okay. So this ship is going through all the things. So a path forged in shame and anxiety producing habits. If you find that you are someone whose path with their family or their friends and their first 3 blocks that we've talked about initially, and there's continuous reinforcement of shame or purity culture. And when I talk about purity culture, I'm talking about separating sexes so that one does not distract the other, requesting that girls hide their bodies so that they don't distract boys, making sure that girls understand that they have a role in ensuring that men are not to be tempted by them and not to be temptress, that the way in which they look and they portray themselves greatly impacts how people will respect them. And waiting until marriage is a significant part of having great sexual pleasure. And I can greatly let you guys know that that ship has sailed, and it is not actually true, because waiting until you're married is not it's not a end all. And if you still have for great sex, you still have problems, even if both of you are virgins. So what happens once your ship has launched and you have all these added baggage attached attached to. You find that you're passing through orbits with anxiety, shame, avoidant behaviors, and oftentimes painful intercourse, because the conversation on pleasure and sexual enjoyment does not often tell you about things such as discord. Like, for example, how are you as a person being able to manage um, understanding sexual arousal and sexual desire, which is a basic one. And I'll just go through that quickly for you. So sexual desire is your brain and your body, well, not your body all the time, but your brain basically saying, okay, I'm desirous of having sex. You tell your partner, yeah, I think that this is no, I really want to get into it and what's not. But when they actually start, or you try to actually engage in sex, you realize that you're not actually aroused. So your body has not responded to what your mind has said. And this discord is something that often afflicts many persons, but it often comes to with it drags you back a lot more when you're pulling along these kinds of baggages like anxiety and shame and avoidant behaviors. So, for example, when you enter into a relationship, and for all intents and purposes, this is a partner that you can really enjoy yourself with. You really want to be free up and loving up with the person or what's not, but you find yourself handling a lot of anxiety about whether or not they could be the one, and why it is that they need to be the one, so that you don't have too many persons to count on one hand. This is yet another thing that I think I picked up from Mary Jerome Dickey books. And people will always talk about, you should always be able in your lifetime count all of your partners on one hand. And it was like, okay. So then you find yourself wanted to stay with one partner for a long time so that you don't acquire more partners, and your sexual pleasure actually declines because you might not be enjoying sexual pleasure with that person. The relationship could be toxic. It could just not be a good fit for neither of you, but everybody wants to stay so that they are not seen as, to use a very old-fashioned word, promiscuous, right? So that's where that comes in. Sometimes you, as I was saying before, you have a relationship, you really like the person, but you have this feeling of shame every time they attempt to kiss you or fondle you, and you want to engage in this activity. You're desirous of the activity, but you're unable to become aroused because of all the hidden messages. Well, I would say hidden, but all of the background scripts that's running in your head. So the script might be saying to you, for example, he or she, this person, they can think less of you if you let them touch you. He or she, they can talk about it, and they can talk about how slack he was. You only talking to him for 1 week, 2 weeks, a month. How dare you engage with this person in this manner? And all of these things tend to come up. You, instead of enjoying yourself and really letting go and enjoying sexual pleasure, you find yourself in an anxiety-laden state, shame-filled, very rigid, but yet you desire it. And the juxtaposition between your desire and shame sometimes cracks people in half, because they're not able to truly work through all of the issues that come up when they recognize that their desire and their quest for sexual pleasure is severely being impacted by the first three building blocks that laid a foundation that was laced with shame and fear and Puritan beliefs that don't allow them to really enjoy themselves as a human being. And that's the truth. So this is what just checking my second screen, just in case you guys are wondering. This is what this particular scene is about, and then maneuvering it as you seek out sexual pleasure. So whether or not you choose to acknowledge the impact or not. So you might be saying, no, LaToya, that's not me. Like I free up and I'm good and what's not. But even in your freeness, you still drag along your beliefs based on the things that people would have said to you before, and your family, your friends, and media, right? And it might not come out as anxiety or shame, but it might even just come out as being too open or too free or not knowing when and where to shut up and shut off. So that is all about how understanding and recognizing yourself as a sexual being and how sexual pleasure really can best be expressed for you yourself as an individual. So let's talk about getting back on course, because it's always good to, well, Maya Angelou always says, or she said, when you know better, you do better. So now you know that these things can impact you significantly, and you recognize that you might be dragging along some bags of shame and embarrassment. You recognize the anxiety that you might feel after sex or having engaging in any kind of sexual experiences with other persons. It leaves you guilt laden. It could leave you at the end of the bed biting your nails. I've had persons say stuff like, well, not to me, but I've seen in SRHR discourse about persons having to pray afterwards, after having sex, and really being in a traumatic state, or asking their partners to give them a minute and leave the room because they really need to collect themselves after they've engaged in sex, because they really had great troubles with meshing together themselves as a sexual being and themselves as someone who is a lover of Christ, or just recognize, even if they don't walk that path, just having the inner script that they are less than know that they've engaged in sex. Yeah, it happens, and it happens a lot. So one thing is to recognize your rights. And I put this big definition here. I don't plan to read it. But recognizing your right as a person to express yourself sexually allows you to operate in a framework of a little bit or a lot more freedom, depending on how far you want to read this, right? And it allows you to recognize that people have given you boxes to standing that you don't necessarily need to be in anymore. As you age up and you mature, your sexual freedom can be completely based on how you and your interaction with religion, family, friends define it. And the unlearning, and I really do mean unlearning, of the thought processes and the information that you have been given is a long road, but it's possible to do. And as a sex coach, I do it all the time because it's required for persons to live their best sexual lives. It's required for persons to be their most authentic selves. And we hear that a lot more now. And it particularly is relevant because when you live and you work in a social media atmosphere, or in this, we on the Rihanna internet, when you live in this world that we're living in right now, it's very easy for persons to show you one thing but be something completely different. So you see the top I have on, but you don't see my bottom, right? So you don't see the entire picture at any point, and you're not seeing it today, just letting you know, right? So you don't see the entire picture. And that's where people often talk about the authentic self. But an authentic self is also an allowing you to live a life that is fruitful in a way that you want to live it. And what recognizing your sexual rights allows you to do is realize that only you are determinant for your own sexual expression, and that you have a right to express yourself in whatever way you feel is good and great once it doesn't encroach on somebody else's rights. So read that and understand that you are expressing yourself as a sexual being once it doesn't encroach on somebody else's rights. It's all good and well. So you can have really great sex in different positions with whomever and however you want, once it doesn't encroach on anybody else's rights. Okay? And that is a significant aspect of understanding or realizing sexual rights and coming to a part of your life where you're like, okay, this is what I was taught. It's not serving me. But this is how I would like to build my best sexual life. So embracing your sexual pleasure. So now we've talked about what sexual pleasure is. We've talked about the building blocks and how we built our sexual pleasure, how we get off course and what helps us to get off course because of the building blocks and how they've been set up for us. I'm gonna talk a little bit now about embracing sexual pleasure. Just swallowing because I forgot to bring water. So when you're talking about embracing sexual pleasure, I identify 3 areas I want you to look at. Identifying what sexual pleasure looks to you. So this is important and critical because sitting with the experiences you've had before, it's good for you to see what you feel. Not what your mother said, what your sister said, what your cousin said, not what the church say, not what the pastor say, not what Marlena say on whatever program Marlena was on. States of Beverly Hills, Los Angeles, not what anybody's social media says. But what do you say about sexual pleasure? Do you like being kissed? Do you like small, light kisses? Do you even like physical touch? Who are you attracted to? If you ask yourself and you sit and you say, okay, look, I think of my most erotic self and I really like this particular action. I like this particular thing. Don't think about, okay, but 1 Corinthians, blah, 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 say that thou shalt not. No. What do I like? What do I feel like lights fire in me and makes me like, fire all of my synapses and make my brain feel a visible test? But what ignites that in me and makes me feel good? And that's the first critical thing in sexual pleasure. Like really identifying and sitting with, talking to yourself and writing it out and writing it down and say, okay, look, I like this. And I think that this is something that I can get with and I feel comfortable doing. You want to write things that make you uncomfortable. Don't do things because you think this is what somebody else would expect you to put down, but just write things that you like. If you only like missionary, put down just missionary. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, but missionary, bless your heart.
Hi, LaToya.
Yes, please.
10 more minutes.
All right, no, I almost done, so that's good. Hey.
Okay.
So you identify what sexual pleasure looks like to you. And then the second thing I want you to do is working through feelings of shame and see where that looks, what that looks like to you. So are you embarrassed by something, about a body part, about a particular action, something that you may carry on into your sex life? Where or how does that look? And exploring your own body and mind, erotically mapping your pleasure. So sounds pretty, but really it just means like, do I like a breast in my hand? How is my body? If you're a man and your body is a little bit bigger and you actually have like chubby, let's say chubby, but like bigger upper body strength, and therefore your cups on your chest are a little bit bigger, do you like when your partner plays with your chest? Do you not like that? Do you like people touching your tummy? Do you feel shame about your stomach? Do you feel good about your stomach? Those are the things that help you to achieve great sexual pleasure. And I like to pull out Lizzo for this because I love the woman. I love that she can be naked and feel good in her body. And I think that she says things that, to me, lets you reflect on yourself and say, okay, look, as she said her last interview, she wished people would talk to her because she's intelligent and, smart and what's not, rather than them talking to her because she's fat and black, pretty much, right? But I appreciate the fact that because she's bigger and she doesn't meet the stereotype of what beauty is, people are talking to her, recognizing, well, where you get this self-confidence from? And she's like, what are you talking about? This is a no-brainer. I want you to also rethink the concept of sex drive and embrace the exploration of your sexual brakes and accelerators. And this is by a book by Emily. I'm going to butcher the last name, but I'll send it to Kelia and Monique. Emily Nagoski. Come As You Are. And it dismisses the concept of sex drive, because as humans we can survive without sex. I mean, look at monks, look at Catholic priests, they do well. And really look at what are your brakes and accelerators. This is good because your sexual pleasure and expressing it is good for you to recognize what will get you there and what will stop you from getting there. So a sexual brake is exactly what brake is. It stops you from achieving your greatest sexual pleasure and identifying, okay, look, I recognize that if we are not in a place that I am comfortable, if we're not in a secure location, and if you guys are someone who does not have their own place of abode, and you have to be sneaking around, a back of a car might not be something that's that's an accelerator for you. You might need to tell that to your partner. So when you identify your brakes and your accelerators, it lets you communicate better to the person that you're expressing yourself sexually with, so that you can achieve your best sexual pleasure. I hope that's clear. So a brake is something that prevents you from really expressing yourself as a sexual being, and an accelerator is exactly what it says. Something that allows you to just go forward head on and go, yeah, boy, I'm ready, willing to go. Nothing is stopping me. I've told you already. I've mapped my body. I know what feels good. I know what's good for me, and I'm ready to go. Right. So accelerators and brakes, what arouses sexual desire in you, and you recognize whether or not you're somebody that has more accelerators, or are you someone who has more brakes? Do you have things that will stop you from having sex more than things that will help you to have sex? Like, for example, are you someone who, if their partner had to pass and it smelled good, would you be aroused, and would you get aroused and desirous of sex? Or would you be like, how easy is it for you to push go on your button for sex? These are things that allow you to achieve better sexual pleasure, because it tells you immediately, okay, look, these are areas I need to deal with. These are things I need to communicate. So it really does help. I love this because it puts into a diagram everything that you need to have a great sexual experience and enjoying your best sexual pleasure. And I would even say intimacy, because when you have these things and it is encompassed by enthusiastic verbal communication, which is consent, you have the best sexual pleasure. So you have pleasure, you have desire, you have consent, you have arousal, and then again we have consent. So how does this start? You have a desire to have sex, and then you verbalize that to your partner. So you go to the consent button, right? So I go, hi, I like you, you like me, I desire us to having sex with you. Very good. Do you desire me? Yes. On to consent. Good. Then we start with things like arousal. We start kissing. My body starts to respond. We go there. I start to experience pleasure. And throughout the sexual experience, I continuously check in with the partner. Are you enjoying this? Does this feel good? Are you experiencing pleasure? And it's not like annoying, like you're good, you're good, you're good. More like, I really want to make sure you're enjoying this experience. Is this still good for you? Should we still continue? Yes. I'm both male and female. And I would say, especially both the men and females, well, however you identify, quite honestly, to all individuals, that you and your partner should always do a little checking throughout the intercourse, because at some points people might be turned off and not want to let you know because they've already said yes, so they think they can't take back consent. And that's not true. There's some ways you get into it and you might not be feeling it anymore. You could divert or do something else. The person doesn't feel like, oh gosh, I have to go through this because I start, but now I start, he says something that turned me off. Realize that consent can be withdrawn at any point. At any point. If that angers you, you need to sit with that and see why you think that you are entitled to somebody else's body. Ain't nobody got time for that. It's not that 2020 of a year. This is the year where you open your mouth and you get the sex you want, because the next pandemic could take you out. So it doesn't make sense not saying what you want. And this diagram shows you exactly how you do that. You can enthusiastic verbal communication. So it's not like a drunk yes. It is not a yeah. It is enthusiastic. It is that you are continuously seeking and hearing and recognizing and telling your partner that you're enthusiastically wanting and desirous of the sex you're having. And if they say no, you're ready to believe, okay, well, this good. All right, I could finish off myself. I'm good over here. I'm moving with that. Good. I saw something yesterday. I wanted to include it, but had my brain, but no, it comes back. Where someone on Instagram was complaining that he had spent $150 on a date and then he didn't get sex. And the other male was saying to him, well, how dare you think that a meal is a worthy, it's not an exchange. Like, that's not the reason that you did that. So I'm glad that people are recognizing that these things are toxic mentalities, and they're coming around slowly but surely. So this is just a little bit of desire being the psychological urge to be sexual, deciding in your mind to make love. And arousal is the physiological aspect of being turned on. And this is a part of for consent. Kili, are you up?
Yes, we have 2 more minutes. Because we do want to
So this
have
is
time
it.
to take some questions.
Okay. So I just wanted to I'll flip through these ones very quickly. And this is just on redefining sex and shaking out what sex looks like to you. So when I'm telling you to erotically map your body, I'm talking about looking at these zones. Yes, and including toys where possible, because not all of us are able, and not all of us have full dexterity of hands and things. And the vibrator is a great way to not be ableist and to recognize that other people need other things, and then Bitcoin, it just helps to have something that's battery operated that can help you get there faster. Right. So these are my last 2 slides. Sex you can enjoy, and it doesn't end with ejaculation. Just saying, expanding your sexual repertoire is vital. So just because your partner comes doesn't mean that sex is over. Just letting you know. And sex coaching, why it's good and great is that it gives you a neutral voice, and there are many rules and information on sexual pleasure and health. Someone to walk you toward a path that is best for you. It's always the best. Kelia, over to you.
Thank you, LaToya, for your honest and open opinion on sexual pleasure and intimacy. I'm sure that we will have many questions coming in now after such discussion, but I'll let Monique go first. And then as time goes, if we have any other, because I'm not seeing any at the moment, then I'll ask them. So Monique, over to you. But thank you, LaToya.
Thanks, LaToya, for a great presentation. See what I told you? We left the spices to last, and I really enjoyed it as always. I just want to maybe start with some of my takeaways. I do have 2 questions that were sent to me directly in my inbox. I think for me, where we sit at UWIHARP, looking at sexual pleasure as a human rights issue, and just pulling from the quote that you spoke about, and of course it's a longer quote from the Global Advisory Board for Sexual Health and Well-Being, and just the last part of that definition that that says the experiences of human sexual pleasure are diverse, and sexual rights ensure that pleasure is a positive experience for all concerned and not obtained by violating other people's human rights and well-being. And that is what LaToya was talking about. And for me, a big issue is around consent. But also it brings to mind, when we think about sexual pleasure, whose body has the right to sexual pleasure? Does that include disabled people? Does it include persons living with HIV? Does it include terminally ill people? Persons from the LGBT community, adolescents, teenagers, sex workers, women. And I say women because there are certain subcultures, and this is a whole, I think, maybe topic on itself, where sexual pleasure among women is vilified, demonized. In some cultures, there's female genital cutting, removal of the clitoris, which has one job in the world, and that's to give sexual pleasure, and that's removed through clitoridectomy. And the other 2 I have on my list, and of course the list, I will have 10 on my list, but I'm sure there are others. Unmarried people, do they have the right to sexual pleasure? And what about senior citizens? Do they have the right to sexual pleasure? So I'm throwing those out to see, especially in the climate now that we have the discussions around same-sex unions becoming decriminalized in Barbados is very much a politicized issue. So sexual pleasure is a human right, which makes it a political issue. So that takes us into a different trajectory of the conversation, but certainly where my mind is, from where I sit at UWIHARP, who has access to sexual pleasure, who has the right to sexual pleasure. I'm now going to take the two questions.
You're muted, Monique.
Oh my God, I hope y'all heard that. Like
Oh, we
all
did
of that
not.
speak. No, but I mean, seriously? You
No,
got my
we
key
didn't.
takeaways about who has the right to sexual pleasure, right?
Yeah, we heard that.
Yes,
we heard
you
that.
did.
We heard that. We heard that
Okay.
one.
So I'm just saying that I'm going to talk, take the questions that came into me privately. There are two. And they were both on actually around sexual abstinence. And the first one, I'm going to say it by saying she and her partner were both sexually active in the past. Now they have decided to abstain until marriage. And her partner says is on board, but seems to be eager to push for more sexual intimacy, which includes French kissing and touching of the genitalia and breasts. But she's not comfortable with this, and she wants to know how she can satisfy him but stay on track. And those are her words. I would have a different response to satisfying him, but LaToya, I think I will let you answer that first, and then I will take the second question. Then Keely can take the other comments and questions.
I think the problem is that both of us have the same. We have a similar mindset. In his satisfaction is his satisfaction, and he can handle that himself. She doesn't need to be included, and that's just my take. So that's how I would tell her first. I say, okay, well, his satisfaction is his satisfaction. You don't need to. It's not on you to satisfy him. I'm just saying that. Oh, right. No, I think what you guys have done is something that's a little dangerous in that you've gone ahead and said that you will abstain, but you haven't defined what sex is for both of you. So for you, sex is French kissing and fondling and all the other things that he may not see as sex. As many
No, wait. What I'm gathering is that he wants to go to the French kissing and the touching, but she is afraid that it may lead to difficult, risky situations. That's what my interpretation of what she's saying.
Okay. Okay, so if she's worried that if she goes down that lane, well, then
right, so she seems to be afraid.
The same response is required, because if you haven't defined what is abstinence for each of you, because clearly if you're requesting that kind of interaction, then both of you haven't defined what is safe or what abstinence looks like for you. What does it look like to you? She could say, okay, abstinence look like to me, we're not kissing, we're not doing anything that could lead us down this road. I just want us to pray together. I don't know why my phone is ringing. Hey, can I call you back? Right. I want us to, let's say, pray together or some other distracting activity that deems more, I don't know, more to give more closeness without actually having intercourse.
Yeah, can I just add here, because we've had a couple of other sessions on abstinence, and that also is your right to decide to choose to abstain. But as LaToya said, we probably need to have a conversation with you have to have a conversation with your partner about what abstinence means. And if maybe if you're not comfortable with that kind of intimacy, then maybe avoiding situations that will lead to that. So maybe more, as she's saying, praying, yes, if you're both religious. I'm not sure. Maybe we're assuming that they are. And maybe, Maybe things like going to the cinemas,
No,
going.
too dark.
But
Just
even
say.
holding hands, if she's comfortable holding hands, that level of intimacy. But the other thing that I want to highlight, especially if you've been sexually active before, and I think maybe that is a whole other conversation, is to people abstain for different reasons, right? For different periods of their life, if they're going through transitions from different partners, if, for example, if they're becoming more religious or spiritual, um, but it's identifying to, you know, that it's very difficult, especially if you've been having good sex, to abstain from sex and knowing what good sex was like before. So it will be a challenge, but I think you have to find identify those spaces, as I said, where you won't be putting yourself in those situations where you may not want to go. So avoiding you know, going to maybe your dorm or your room together, maybe staying more in open spaces, those kinds of environments that probably won't lead you to temptation.
That's a good excellent point. And then the
Yeah.
reasons why you guys have decided to do this.
Yeah. I think the other question is actually linked to that one as well, because they're both about absence, as I may have mentioned. Is how to get to know your partner intimately without going all the way. And if you've made that decision, you need to let your partner know that this is the decision that you've made. Um, but I'll let maybe LaToya respond to that, and then maybe I can fill in from I think where the students have come to us, and we've had other sessions on abstinence. But I'll let LaToya's take on that. Um, Her question is how to get to know your partner intimately without going all the way.
All right. So intimacy is being seen and being heard, and being able to that partner being able to feel loved by you in that particular way. So I would say you can definitely have intimacy. And
Yeah, when LaToya is out, so she'll give you from her perspective as a sex coach in terms of how intimacy is defined. But it's really important that you have this open conversation with your partner. And I think the same applies to if you won't put yourself in perhaps those tempting situations where you're in a space alone or in a room alone, dorm room. Certainly, the types of movies, if you're watching movies together, will influence. So, in other words, avoid pornography, watching pornography together. Those types of situations that you might lead you into a direction that you may not be comfortable with. So I'll let LaToya, when LaToya comes back, I will let her maybe pick up on that. And then, oh, there you are.
sorry.
Yeah, do you want to respond? And I gave a very broad response about same thing, avoiding public spaces, sorry, private spaces where you might not want to be able to go all the way. But I'll defer to you from a sex coach perspective on looking at intimacy and different ways of being intimate.
So as I said before, you would definitely have a conversation with your partner about what your values are and why you have decided to take this course. Because if you're not playing an outright, then the person might just be frustrated with the whole like, are you playing games? But I value sex. Are you guys on the same page? And to me, that's one of the first steps. So once you have that conversation so that everybody's on the straight and narrow, then you yourself will recognize, all right, this is what I view as going too far. And these are the kinds of activities I'm willing to partake in. And these are the activities I do not want to partake in. You set your boundaries very clearly, and then you watch your partner whether or not they are someone who's constantly pushing on the fence, or are they respecting you and listening to you and therefore trying to understand you as an individual rather than trying to learn you sexually. And that's very important because sometimes people might value sex first over learning the person, like their hobbies and that kind of thing. And you have to be respectful to everybody's views. Maybe they don't want to be sexually absent, or they don't want to go slow. They like to get to the meat of the matter fast. So you really have to see and be upfront and honest with the person and say, look, this is where I'm at. This is what I prefer. And I know that. So if you recognize, for example, if they set boundaries and say, I prefer to go slow. I want to really get to know you. I want us to have a deeper understanding and talking, and spending quality time is one of my love languages. This is how I like to, get to learn my people. And I don't want to be engaging in sexual activities. And they constantly be pushing on that barrier, then the person is not for you. And that was being my response.
Thanks, LaToya. Thanks for your response. Great response. I'll let Kelia maybe take the questions. I think I have another inbox question, private question. So I'll let Kelia take the public ones in the general chat. Are you seeing them?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
They're saying that you did a really good job, and they thank you for being real and honest.
Oh, thank you.
They love your vibe. Okay, so the first question is asking, what do you think about an agreeable safe word over no or stop? A safe word like pineapple.
Pineapples are, because of pineapple on pizza, that really gets people ticked off nowadays. Agreed. I think that if you want to enter into sex play with anybody, you need to know what your parameter of safety is, especially if you are someone who had experienced sexual trauma before. That is very important. A good word, I would say, food is okay if you're not in an environment where food is, like, you wouldn't want to say pineapple where you're at a restaurant, because the person might think you're ordering a pineapple, and you might be doing a particular sex play that involves like voyeurism or something. I'm coming, give me one sec. But it's not a bad word to use in the bedroom where you don't necessarily have any kind of food or that kind of thing there. You can use that. And red is also a good one, because red literally means stop in just about every other word of our thing. Or you might use a sign language or however, depending on whether or not you can see, hear, however your ableist intentions are.
And it should be agreed by both persons.
Oh yes, correct.
To be clear as well.
I always say, when you open up your mouth, down there opens. It makes good sense, because if you don't open here, down there's close up. You keep saying, when you say no, and I learned this especially when I was giving birth. They always say, when you open your vocal cords, your vagina will open and the baby will come out. So that's why screaming it's not screaming more, so it's growling will get a baby out rather than screaming. It's how you open your mouth as well.
Wow, I love that. I love that, LaToya. Go ahead. You have any more, Kelia?
One more. Is there such a thing as a good time span for sex, or does it vary?
I think it depends on the person and where you are in your lifespan. For example, when you're younger, and if you start having sex young, let me say 14, 15, you might be able to, depending on how your home situation is, you might be able to get in a good 10 minutes. I don't know where you are, right? But if you have more accepting household and you're in your teens, what's not, you're able to have your people over, you can have hours of sex playing, what's not. And you have the energy for it. You don't pay no bills, you don't have no kids. You could do plenty of sex play for longer periods of time. As you age, I find that person's ability to be engaged in sex play for very, very long might diminish, and therefore they need to be intentional about it. But there's no set time. There's none. And the older you get, you recognize that time is variant and quality is more important. It's a quality of sex. You can have very long, terrible sex, or you can have a very good time in a short amount of time. Yeah. Yeah. But I find also penetrative sex, because many heterosexuals will often talk about penetrative sex. I find that women don't usually have orgasms with penetrative sex in a very quick order. So it's better to precede that with sex play that allows them to have an orgasm before penetrative sex occurs.
Thank you for that information, Monique. That's the last question.
That you have? Okay,
Yeah.
I'm mindful of the time. It's 1:45 now. Sorry, I'm just need some clarification. Okay, so so this is from a male participant who messaged me directly. He's inquiring the likelihood of, he's not sexually active, he's a virgin. He's inquiring of the likelihood of any risk from an abstinence or not masturbating. That's one part of the question. And then there is another part to the question 2. So from the same person. So yeah, if there are any health risks from us for as a male abstaining from sex and not masturbating.
I think it's when you get older, I'm a little rusty on this particular knowledge, but I know that the use of the prostate gland is better for reducing prostate cancer. But that's usually for when you get older. I mean, if you're in your teens or early 20s, you're not having sex, you're not at a big risk for prostate cancer right now. But as you get older, you would be higher on the risk in your 40s and stuff. If you're not using it, essentially you would lose it. So you would need to make sure you exercise the ejaculatory muscle to ensure that your prostate is being massaged and everything is working in working order. But you won't lose anything by not doing it right now. Not at all.
Great, thank you. Great answer, LaToya. Then he goes on to say, I identify as a heterosexual male. However, many of my friends and even strangers have assumed that I am homosexual. I am uncertain of any traits or mannerisms concerning myself that would support such an assumption. Why might this be?
Because of toxic male culture. That's not it though. It's toxic masculinity. It's very annoying where people just go up to people and say, "Oh, you gotta be gay. You just give me gay vibes." And I really want to tell them, excuse my French, your mother, because just mind your business.
That's my response for 2020, really.
The thing is about it, the type of toxic masculinity that we are accustomed to in the Caribbean is so prevalent that it's even women. I've known women to do things that are indicative of a characteristic of a toxic masculinity, where they expect a man to behave in a particular way because it's been taught to them that men are this and they're that. Yeah. And if they come to them and they are not overly aggressive, they are, for example, understanding and kind, they understand the concept of consent,
or gentle,
are gentle individuals, and all of a sudden you must be gay, and
exactly.
You must not even know how to caress the female body, but I can caress your mind, and therefore I am the highest of the highest of erotic individuals. I think that is one of the most frustrating things to me, especially operating in the Caribbean diaspora, when I see women continuously repeat toxic male characteristic points as a benchmark for maleness. Or he's put me in my place. Child, that is not a good thing. That's a red flag. And if you recognize that people are continuously stating that you are they find you, for lack of a better word, effeminate, then point out to them what they're asking. And what makes you think that because they can dress well, because they have manners? What is it exactly that you are expecting me to prove my maleness to you?
Very good answer. So it's not anything wrong with you at all. It is the toxic masculinity in society. And just to respond to LaToya's comment that both males and females are socialized with these same stereotypical gender values, patriarchal, misogynistic, hegemonic values, and unfortunately, neither of them benefit from these stereotypes. So I think that's it from me today. I'm looking at the time, it's 10 to 2. And I really appreciate LaToya. Thank you so much for a great presentation. I'll give you a chance to maybe say your last words, and maybe if Killian wants to say something.
No, I thought it was a really good presentation, and I hope that persons gathered much information, and they take the good value of it and really explore themselves and know what their rights as it relates to sexual health and reproductive health, and even pleasure and intimacy. Making so that they're able to make informed decisions within the relationships that they choose. Once they're able to make those good decisions in relationships, then a lot of the social issues that we face in terms of abuse and violence and so on will decrease on a high, because you're able to communicate well and those different things. So thank you, LaToya, for sharing this valuable information with us.
Yeah, I really want to say thank you guys very much for having me, for letting me pop out when my coworkers are busy.
Of course, and there they are
And they're
again.
back at the door again, so they'll be back in here shortly again.
Yeah.
But,
we're used to that.
Listen, they've been having a ball outside. I just checked on them. They've been houses. But yes, if you guys have any questions, queries, I'm sure Monique can put you on to me.
Sure thing.
My business name, which is Pillow Talk Caribbean@gmail.com. So you guys can be sure to send me an email, send me a DM on Instagram. I respond. I do. And I can answer your questions. So I'm here as a resource for you guys. Just shoot your shot.
Awesome. And remember, we will be sending out the evaluation forms. Kelia will be sending them out so that you can give your input on maybe topics that you're interested in and your feedback on today's session. And to remind you that we have our shock sessions continuing until December the 1st, which is World AIDS Day. And we will be focusing on sexual health conversations, on COVID among the Caribbean communities. So we'll be bringing in experts from the field and marginalized communities who are actually feeling the pain, feeling the struggles. Next week, we have the United Nations Population Fund, who will be talking about the COVID humanitarian crisis and their role in providing sexual health services in the Caribbean. And this is from the sub-regional office. So I'm really excited about that. Thank you all once again for joining us. And I hope to see you soon. And be safe, everyone. Take care.